Welcome back to the Winner's Circle. I'm here today with Robert from Stretto. He is tackling one of the biggest problems in the law industry, Chapter 11 mess and chaos. Robert, welcome to the Winner's Circle and congratulations on the AI Excellence Award.
Hey, Russ, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Why don't you give us just like an elevator pitch of Stretto, get us kind of a baseline and your role at Stretto?
Sure. So I would say the elevator pitch of the company is Stretto provides support, services, technology for a variety of professionals that are involved in bankruptcy. And that runs the gamut from small individual Chapter 7 bankruptcies up to the largest Chapter 11 bankruptcies you'd see in the news every day. What we like to say is 90% of the bankruptcies filed in the US are either done with our software, using our forms, or with one of our teams. So the unsexy behind the scene plumbing that is the bankruptcy system in the U.S. We're involved in so many different facets of that. And personally, my background is in the Chapter 11, the large bankruptcy space. I'm not a lawyer. I like to say I've learned how to talk and kind of play and act like one. I had a business background, got involved in the industry by chance. And 25-ish years later, I'm still working with the same leadership team that I started with. And now I'm in charge of all of Stretto's innovation efforts, are really our AI focused new initiatives, technologies, services, et cetera. And I like to say I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. And so I get to have, roll up my sleeves and get busy in a lot of different areas, anything that AI could touch within the company.
Well, this is such a ripe, market for AI. In my opinion, the whole law industry has got to be going through a boom with this AI stuff. Just the amount of documentation and the complexity of it all. But bankruptcy is one of the most complex and stressful processes in business. What does that communication kind of typically look like if somebody's not using Conductor, your AI tool?
That's a really good question. I think you nailed it on both complex and then also just volumes of paper and volumes of documentation. You think about the largest bankruptcies, the most complex businesses that have to restructure. There's thousands and thousands of pages of information that's out there. And what we found is this is a niche industry. No one goes to school and thinks, I want to learn bankruptcy. No, I don't even think a lot of lawyers go to law school and say, I want to practice bankruptcy law. And part of where we sit is we're kind of in the center of the information between the debtors themselves, the lawyers, the court, and then most importantly, all the stakeholders who are impacted by the bankruptcies. And that can be everyone from former employees to small mom and pop vendors to large landlords who are creditors of these bankruptcies. And so what Conductor does is we built this platform that communicates bankruptcy in a more clear, user-friendly way, so that when I'll use the example of Saks Global, the parent company of Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus, et cetera. When they filed for bankruptcy, the minute these documents are filed, you can go on our platform and you can say, well, what do I do? I've never been through a bankruptcy before, but I I'm a sweater vendor and I supply sweaters to Saks and I'm owed, six figures and it's a big deal for me. What do I do now? And we built this platform, Stretto Conductor, to understand the documents and answer that question in a grounded, verifiable way, but also in a way that actually answers the question for that vendor. Another thing that it can do is you're a lawyer, you just see, hey, someone just filed 1,000-page document related to a court hearing that I'm on my way to. There's there's no way I can read the entire document, much less download the document. Conductor understands it, and you can say, give me the highlights. I'm, I'm a vendor on my way to court. Describe the key points of this document that was just filed, and you'll get those answers immediately. So it was very purpose built for this community because it is complicated. No one really understands it, but we do. So we designed it for us as users.
Well, and I remember I was in publishing with the business journals for many years, and I remember the reporters literally going to the courthouse and
Mhm.
writing down the names of all the bankruptcies, and then bringing them back and typing them in to let everybody know. It
Mhm.
surely isn't that bad. What's broken about how information flows in these Chapter 11 cases today?
I think That's a really good question. I would say what's broken is it's complicated and it impacts a lot of people who this is not part of their daily life. If you are like I said, a vendor, a former employee of a large company. I mean, think about the airlines or the auto parts manufacturers, the car companies themselves that have filed for bankruptcy. Um, that is not part of understanding that process is not part of your daily life, not something you would ever come across. We like to say when we're dealing with these cases and we're dealing with our clients, we hope we do a great job and we never have to work with you again because they don't want to ever have to work with us again. And so what was really broken is that oftentimes these large bankruptcies affect a lot of people who will never have to deal with it again. And it's a really critical point there. And it can be overwhelming, it can be intimidating. And so part of what Stretto does just across the all the different services outside of just Conductor, this tool we built, but a lot of the service that we provide is making it understandable for everyone that's involved.
Now, for people outside of this legal world, why is it so hard for the stakeholders to access that basic information in a case? It seems like that ought to be, delivered to my inbox somehow, or something. It seems like I should be getting notifications and all of that type of stuff. Why is it so hard to get the just this basic information if I'm a creditor?
So there's two answers to this, and I'll give you a little bit of history. And I I don't even need to apologize for it, but everyone who I work with knows I'm a storyteller. I can kind of go off on tangents, but I promise it's relevant. So, bankruptcy code, bankruptcy law is federal, and it was revised back in 1978, and there were a lot of changes. And one of the key changes to the bankruptcy code allowed, or what it said was, certain cases are too big for the courts to deal with themselves, because, like you said, it used to be physical documents at a courthouse. If you wanted to understand what was happening, you might have to go and get photocopies of the document from the court. And so, what the up the revisions in 1978 basically said, you know what? For some of these cases, they're too big. And so the courts, there can be some of the work that the courts would do can be done by an agent of the court. And so we will authorize certain companies under certain, restrictions to perform some of the duties of the court. That's how our core business in bankruptcy um, originated. Is there's companies like ours who can essentially become the information hub in these bankruptcy cases. And so then at least documents could be digitized. We could create websites, and really that didn't start happening until the early 2000s. Uh, and so that was great. At least then, if you're impacted by a bankruptcy, you could go to a website and you could get some documents. And that's kind of been the status quo for the last 25 years. Is everyone in the space had websites. And then everyone in the space started saying, "Oh, you know what? You can subscribe to notifications and we'll email you the documents." That's all great. And it was good for bankruptcy lawyers, created a lot of efficiency, but that doesn't impact the the like I said, the stakeholders who are involved in a bankruptcy for maybe the first and only time ever. It doesn't impact and it doesn't necessarily improve things for the educational community or reporters or people who are trying to do research, because yeah, that's great that I can get a notification, but what if I need to understand how this notification impacts 10 other similarly situated cases? Or what if I'm trying to do research? What if I'm trying to understand this? It didn't help you understand it, it just gave it to you. And so what we did with Conductor is we said, we want to understand every single bankruptcy document in the context of the federal bankruptcy code, the local rules of the individual jurisdiction that you're operating in, because of course cases are administered differently in the Southern District of New York and the Southern District of Texas and the Southern District of California. They all have nuance. They all have their unique local rules. And so we said, you have to understand that, because asking, how do I do this in this case to impact my rights, you might get a slightly different answer if you're in a different jurisdiction. So we said, not only do we want to understand what the document means, we have to understand what it means in the context of the federal bankruptcy code, the local rules, and then really, what does it mean in the context of that one case I'm dealing with? Someone objected to this. What does that mean? How does that impact the 10 documents I've already read? That's what we're doing differently. That's what Conductor does. It really understands these documents in the context of the hierarchy of bankruptcy, the rule structure of bankruptcy. And so that what I think is really democratizing the process, because now if you are new or unfamiliar, or if you're trying to understand something bigger than just one document, you can do that because we used AI to really understand the document the way a bankruptcy lawyer would, someone who's been trained for 30 years would, another bankruptcy professional would. We've taught it everything that we knew from that lens and said, okay, now answer the question. Now answer what this means. What does it mean to you? What's next? That's what we built.
So walk us through the kind of the experience. You had this very complex, very manual-ish process for way too long, right? It's been 25 years now. We've just been doing websites. What
Mhm.
exactly is Stretto Conductor, and how does it change that experience?
Sure. So, and I'll story tell a little bit, but AI was newer in the legal space 2, 3 years ago. And we said, part of what we do is every time there's a large case, there's a big call center of people. And we try to teach them the nuances of that case. We try to teach them the rules of that case so that people can call and say, what do I do? What is this deadline? What does this mean to me? What do I do next? And so that was kind of the old way this problem was being attacked. And we said, look, this is exactly what AI should be able to do. We should be able to teach it all the rules of bankruptcy, anything we would teach a new associate, anything we would teach a new consultant who was going to be working in a bankruptcy case. We should be able to teach AI something. But we also, like I said, realized that there's nuance between the 94 different federal bankruptcy jurisdictions. There's nuances and there's differences in all of those jurisdictions. So you can't just say, let's take ChatGPT and run every document through ChatGPT and just then ask it questions, because the context was wrong. The understanding was wrong. And so we sat in this room and said, well, we know this. We know all the rules because we have to teach it to people when they come to the company. We have to explain it to unfamiliar people when we're on the phone. So let's teach it to an advanced AI powered platform and then let the platform answer the question. So that's really what we did. Is we said the issue here is something, we all understand it, but it is complicated and it is voluminous. And it is exactly what AI was built for. Understanding 1,000-page document in the context of the right other documents and right rules. Um, and then on top of that, we're dealing with lawyers. It is really, you can't be wrong here. We're dealing with a legal process. The difference between something shall happen and something will happen are very different. And we had to make sure that it understood and that it understood the law, and that any responses that it gives as we're interacting with these people are grounded in the right documentation from the right case and the right rules. And that. And so we just made sure to we had to make sure that uh, everything we built was both intelligent and then grounded and then performed properly.
Well, the context matters, and I hear that from a lot of AI innovators. Is these kind of specialized platforms. I liken it to tennis. If you want to play tennis, you can go to Walmart and get a tennis racket. You will not win Wimbledon or probably any tournament with a Walmart tennis racket. You need to go to a specialty store, have it strung. You want it tight to your specification. You want the grip to your specification. So, these purpose-built AIs are really, I think, kind of that future where you can have that proprietary intelligence and
Hmm.
and really kind of, be that domain-specific AI expert.
Right. And eh, yeah, I was just going to say, right, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, so how did you guys decide that, that ChatGPT wasn't gonna do it, and that, but at the same time, you're using that kind of chat interface, that, single thread kind of interface?
So let me pause for a second because now the battery on my iPad is low and I need to plug it in, which means I'm going to have to change the orientation of it. I don't know how I feel about that.
We'll see what it does.
See what it does. Okay. Is it gonna fix it automatically? Or
No,
I
I
don't know.
don't think it will.
There we go. Are you? Is it good? Is it kind of back
Yeah,
to
yeah,
that'll work? Okay. Let
yeah,
me just
looks good.
prop it up a little bit more. All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
give it a
What?
beat.
Yep.
We'll back up a little bit. I think I'll go back to my tennis analogy.
Yeah. Let's do it.
So in my world, I think about these kind of purpose-built AIs, almost like I think about tennis rackets. And I know that's a little weird, but if you want to play tennis or go fishing or something, you can go to Walmart and get a fishing rod, and you can get a tennis racket, and they'll have a variety there. But if you're going to win Wimbledon or the Bass Pro Tournament, you're going
Hmm.
to be on a specialized rod that's dialed into you, to your spec, to your grip, all of that stuff. And it seems like you're doing the same thing for the legal industry here, is building this purpose-built AI.
Yes. That is such a great analogy, and it's something that we've seen in the last few years as we've watched the evolution of AI in the legal space specifically is that a lot of the tools are very general. And to be fair, a general tool, like a general research tool where you're just saying, I'm looking for a document related to an airline parts manufacturer bankruptcy, and I want to find something a that's related to contracts with a parts manufacturer. AI can help find that, certainly, but when you start to say, but what does it really mean? What are the specific implications? That's where the answers are too general, because you really need a tool that I want to back up, because I feel like I'm just going down this path of cliches that I'm not going to like. Um,
Cut.
I like, yep, I like the tennis analogy because there are a lot of very general tools in legal space, especially over the last few years. That was kind of how everybody dipped their toe in the water, was with generalized tools. And they serve decent purposes in a lot of ways. But what we found is bankruptcy requires precision. And it requires precision, like I said before, between the different jurisdictions, between the nuances and the differences on a case to case, judge to judge basis. And really, the example we like to give is, if you want to understand an objection that's filed in one case, or if you ask, what does this objection mean in one case, and all you say is, I just want to understand this one document, this one objection. That's your kind of Walmart tennis racket. ChatGPT can say, here's what this document means. But that's not going to do you any good if it was filed and then it was objected to 3 times and amended 3 more times. And really, the answer to your question needs to encompass the whole history of what's going on with that. Because if you want to say, what is this objection trying to do? Saying what this one document tried to do, um, and interpreting one document isn't going to do you any good in the bankruptcy space when there's 8 other related documents that are impacting and modifying it. And so we had to build something that was very specific to bankruptcy, because we said, if someone asks about this objection, you have to look for these other types of documents, and you have to understand how they relate to that objection. And then you have to frame your answer with all of that in context. And so, and the only way we could do that is we understood the market. We the, the technology was built by entrepreneurs and bankruptcy lawyers and founders and technologists. It was built by people who really knew this. I mean, multiple people with decades in this industry. And it matters because we also built it for what we would want. We're not tech entrepreneurs who built something that we thought a lawyer would want. We're bankruptcy lawyers and bankruptcy professionals, and we built something that we would want. And that matters.
Well, and in your nomination, you call out some issues like naive retrieval and reasoning errors that these general AI tools kind of run into all the time. Explain those a little bit, and what does that look like when you hit it?
What we saw when we saw these more general tools in the industry is, um, the if you have a general tool and it's used by a general user who doesn't know specifically what they're asking for, you're going to get a general answer. And a lot of times you don't know it's wrong. If you ask, you know, what is the deadline that this document says, it might tell you just the simple deadline that might be alluded to or laid out in one document, but you don't know that there's other context outside of what you're looking at. And so these general tools won't give you that answer either. So it wasn't that we found these tools in the market had errors. It wasn't like you were saying, answer this question. And the error was, I can't answer that question. You would get an answer. It just, if you didn't know that there was more context that you needed to consider. And so we had to make sure that when we were answering questions about these specific cases, all the context of that case is considered, even if that wasn't what you asked about, because that was the only way to get the real precision that this market demands.
Well, and in the legal setting, having a father who was an attorney, um, you know, criticality, being critical is root to most of them, and trust is the biggest thing to all of them. How are you building conductor that's, trustworthy to these kind of skeptics?
That's a great question. And that's where it helps that it was built by bankruptcy lawyers, because everything is citable and grounded, which now I think I will say is becoming more common with a lot of AI tools. And I appreciate that. And that was partly because we said you can't just give an answer. But for us, especially, if you ask a question in case A, the answer has to come from case A. It's critical. And so and you have to know that it is. So everything is cited. Every single thing it says is cited. And for us, it was also worth noting because a, this was a question that took a lot of fine tuning in how we set up the language model. We don't give legal advice. We're not a law firm. And so it was very important that the public facing version of Conductor isn't giving legal advice. It's providing the information that you need to make a legal decision. And we had to understand the difference. And so every answer that Conductor provides, like I said, is grounded and cited either back to the bankruptcy code, the local rules, or the docket of the specific case. And then we really had to refine the language and the way that it presented information so that it's not legal advice. It's providing the information that you need to either get legal advice or make your own decisions.
Yeah. Now, you had mentioned that you guys have been at this a little while, and the platform's a few years old, and AI's come into this mix. Um, do you find that your users are still kind of double checking the AI, or has that trust point reached a point where we can kind of rely on the platform and they're comfortable with it?
I think anecdotally, what we hear from the market is they do trust the platform, which is fantastic. And I think a lot of it is because we're not trying to do everything. And we're not trying to generate, I think this is key for attorneys. This is not a generative program for like it is not a drafting program. You're not using it to draft your legal documents. We were very specific about what we wanted the use case to be here. It's to understand documents that are filed. It's to understand the implications of those documents. And so when you're not saying, you always run the risk of dealing with hallucinations in AI. Everybody knows it. It's what all lawyers fear. It's what all users fear. But we're not drafting documents for lawyers. We're answering questions and we're going back to a citation. And I think because we said that's all we're going to do and we're going to do it really well, we have developed trust because because you can see it. You can see, okay, it is telling me that I have to respond by this date. These are the three steps, and there's the document. There it is, right in the document that they're talking about. That makes sense. That's real. And it's not drafting your response. It's just telling you all the facts that you need to draft your response. And that has made a big difference in kind of the trustworthiness of the platform. But it's because it's not trying to do everything. It's trying to do one thing really well.
Yeah. Now, I don't think I never really thought about it until talking with you, but these lawyers are becoming the single point of contact for what could be thousands or millions of creditors if it's a big company. And,
Yes.
they're spinning up basically an entire organization to deal with this bankruptcy. It's almost like a little mini company temporarily for 2 or 3 years or whatever the length is. And you guys are really driving kind of this platform to reduce those costs. What do you think operationally, had to happen to make that possible?
I mean, first of all, that's exactly what it is. It is exactly like a new company. A company that's involved in a bankruptcy is essentially operating as two companies. It's the bankrupt entity and then the ongoing entity. And so, I mean, this is one of the tangents that I talk about. But if you're the CFO of a large company that files for bankruptcy, 2 weeks after you file for bankruptcy, you're still trying to run the company. The company is operational. You are trying to restructure that company. At the same time, there's this other legal entity that's involved in a bankruptcy case that your team is also trying to manage, and the rules have changed. All of a sudden, you're not necessarily dealing with GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. You're dealing with the bankruptcy code, and they're similar, but they're also different. And so what we've done and where we've seen this kind of operational efficiency is going back to kind of the question. Yes, a lot of these large cases, the result of a large case filing is that hundreds, thousands, millions of people are impacted by that. And it used to be, and it sometimes is, that they'll call the lawyer. And if you look out in the industry, the billable rates for for bankruptcy professionals especially, it's such a niche and they're very valuable. And the billable rates reflect that. And it's not the best use necessarily of time for a small vendor to be asking routine operational questions to a bankruptcy lawyer who's trying to solve this problem and make sure that a multi-billion dollar company emerges from bankruptcy healthy and operational. But we can do that. And it used to be that we would do that with um, with our own expertise and our own call center, our own communication staff who would answer email. We were innovative with online chat, and we'd be talking to people there because it's much, much cheaper than a bankruptcy lawyer. But now we have this tool that reduces the cost even more. And beyond the cost, it's the availability and accessibility. One of the things, it doesn't matter how many people you have in a call center. If you file a 500-page document, it's going to take a long time for anyone to read the whole document, to understand it, and to communicate what that means to a 500-person call center so that they can answer questions. Conductor does it immediately. Within minutes, everyone, thousands of people at the same time, can be asking questions to get an answer on that 500-page document that was just filed. So not only are they not calling the lawyers, but they're not waiting for days or weeks for someone to explain it to them. The other thing that we didn't even talk about is it's multilingual. One of our largest cases of the last year is Azul Airlines. It's the largest it's the largest Brazilian airline. 32 million customers were potentially impacted by their bankruptcy, and their primary language is Portuguese. And Conductor speaks Portuguese, and it speaks there. So you can go to the website. All the documents are filed in English, but if you're a Portuguese customer who's supposed to go on a flight in 2 weeks, you don't have to wait in line on a call center. You're not calling the bankruptcy lawyers, thank goodness. But you can go on. You can go online. You can ask Conductor. Azul just filed for bankruptcy. I have a flight in 2 weeks. Can I still take my flight? And as long as that answer is in the legal documents that have been filed, which it generally is in a customer programs or critical vendors, there's certain motions that would impact the ability to have this flight, but you can get that answer immediately in your native tongue, um, at a fraction of what that would cost to call a lawyer or to have a call center.
Yeah, or if you're downloading a 500-page document to look for a single line saying saying yes, flights will continue. That it seems like a total
Yeah,
waste of time. What does that
exactly.
impact? What does that impact look like for, for a good size bankruptcy? I mean, are we talking? You know, you mentioned there were 500 call center agents. Is that a typical call
That
center for one of these guys? And
that would be 500 is large. It's a great number. There's very few cases that require 500, but I will give you an example. We were the claims agent on multiple large crypto exchanges that filed for bankruptcy. And each of them had between 1 million and 10 million customers. A bankruptcy like that would generally require between 10 and 20 live operators at all times. And a lot of those cases, initially, when those cases filed, they wanted live operators available 24 hours a day. And now we can do that with a fraction. You still have live people. That's the other thing that's important is all of these resources, we didn't trade it. We didn't say you can't get live support, you can't talk to anybody anymore. That's not our business. We're still here to make sure that everyone understands the process. We're still here to make sure that um, that that information is flowing. But most people just want to know, what's the deadline to do this? Where do I send this to? How can I find the document that I need? Is this the right document that I need? And now we can do that with 3, 4, 5 people with some of the busiest cases. And and the nice thing is, it's so much easier to also understand what's confusing to people. One of the things, this is somewhat off topic, and it's maybe not what the award was intended for, but I'll tell you, one of the things that using AI allowed us to improve that doesn't involve AI is now all of a sudden we have this archive of all the questions that are being asked in cases, and it's really easy for us to log in and say, what's confusing today, what's confusing this week. And we've actually gone in and we've modified language on our website to make it easier for people to get these answers, because we can see what the questions are. We could still do that in a call center, but you had to wait a lot longer. And if you know if the notes that people are making on the calls are formatted differently, sometimes it's easier to kind of surface those insights. Now, not only do we have a tool that's answering the questions with AI, we're also behind the scenes using AI to say, tell me what's confusing. What are people talking about in this case? Like, what are the hot spots in this case? What can we do so that not only does Conductor answer the questions, maybe we can just put the answers out there more easily so that people don't have to ask the questions in the first place. Like, that's what happens when it's purpose built, and we're also experts in this domain, is we're learning from it as we go, and we're iterating on other parts of the business using AI to help us understand all this, and all the data that's coming back. So I geek out about this. I realize it, but it's the platform is teaching us a lot as well.
Well, you've been in this industry a long time, and what I know, from personal experience is that lawyers have been traditionally extremely slow at adopting new technology. I mean, I remember I was working with my father on a contract uh, last year, and just find and replace for him. He was an older guy, but he literally printed it out and marked it up with a pen, and he would say, "Well, this term is undefined. We'll have to go find it." And I'm like, "Well, it's on page 7, page 12, page 13, and it's in the appendix." And he's like, "How did you do that?" So a lot of them are very kind of in their ways, slow to adopt technology. Why is this AI adoption just accelerating all of it?
It there's You're right that lawyers are slow to adopt, but I also think part of that is law and the courts are slow to adopt. And if there's anything I've learned doing this as long as I have, is as much as I've wanted to innovate, and Stretto's a company that's wanted to innovate, I also have to understand why it's slower. And I think the court operates with caution. The court in general wants to act for the benefit of all. And so the court is always very cautious so that change and innovation doesn't, disadvantage any parties. And so that's why you see slower adoption. um I think there's a lot of caution, and I'll say, I think the antidotes of new use of AI and hallucinations and hallucinating case citations, that sticks with people, because this is an industry that has to be very conservative and they don't want to make those mistakes. And so w- I realize that now I'm going to, again, story tell a little bit and go off, not off topic, but even 12 months ago and 18 months ago, going to conferences, sitting in panels, hearing lawyers, both teaching lawyers about technology and AI, and then also hearing other panelists and other questions, you realize that those narratives stick for a long time. If you're going to talk about AI, every single discussion you had talked about the case citations where cases were hallucinated, and the attorney was reprimanded in court. Everybody talks about that, but you don't talk about the thousands of other hours that are saved and the work product that's improved while lawyers are using AI for research, for under it's like the evolution of control F or find and replace, because now it's not just find this clause again, find me everywhere where this clause exists in the contract, and help me find it, and I'll draft the revisions. Now it's more like, find all this, and find the language that's ambiguous, so that hopefully we don't have to revise this again in the future because we've identified language that was weak. That's happening every day, and we're out trying to really promote that. But every time you talk about that, people will also say, but there was that hallucination. There are these hallucinations. And so I think people are slow to adopt because um, there's this is a precise industry. And um, the inherently, the way AI produces content if you really look at it, it's not precise. You know,
Right. It's
it
predictive.
still, yeah, yeah. So that was a long answer to a simple question, but I think it's that it's not out of naivete. I think it's out of wanting to be precise, wanting to be conservative. No one, you know, no one is going to lose their job for doing something correctly the old way, but it's risky when you do something incorrectly the new way, even if you kind of have to experiment and iterate with that to for there to be progress. Uh, so hopefully, we're creating safe boundaries for lawyers to experience some of that progress.
Well, we're only, like I said, like you said, we're only a couple years into this, with the
Yeah,
generative AI capabilities. Where do you see it in 5 years?
that we think about that a lot. I think that when we 12 months ago, I felt like what you were hearing, there was the data that was coming out, and you started to see these different studies that said 30, 40, 50% of law firms are even allowing lawyers to use AI. And I think there were still people, even a year ago, there were probably a lot of people out of firms who thought, yeah, this is not something we're going to do. I think that we've seen a tremendous shift there in the temperature and the tolerance around AI. And so I think that now you have to, and it's a matter of finding out what the right tools are for your firm. I think that within the next 5 years, what I'm hoping is that we're going to see more, more guidance and structure at a federal level. Right now you have, like I said, we have 94 bankruptcy jurisdictions, and you have a lot of courts, and this is bankruptcy, but just in general in the court system, you have a lot of states and individual jurisdictions who are trying to come up with a legal framework to give guidance for lawyers to use AI in their work product. And what I'm hoping and what I think will happen is over these years, there's the next 5 years, you're going to see a more unified standard for what's acceptable, how you have to disclose what you're doing, what is expected. I mean, the example we like to use is the transition from having the having printed like the printed bankruptcy code in law firms office, and when you needed to understand the federal bankruptcy code, you had to go and you'd look through the printed bankruptcy code. When I started in this industry 25 years ago, one of the things I got was a printed copy of the bankruptcy code. And you were expected, and it was okay that you went and use it. It was okay that if you wanted to answer a question, you pulled that out, you highlighted it, you had your post-it notes, and that was okay. It was okay to spend an hour researching the bankruptcy code to come up with an answer. That is not acceptable now. That's basically overhead that you shouldn't be charging a client for. And I think we're at that point where very quickly the market is going to say, if I hire an attorney, it is not acceptable for you to do something the old way when AI can do that for you much faster. That is just what we expect. And so I think we're going to see this evolution. There's so many tools out there. There's so many great tools out there, but I do think we need a framework. Um, we need we need expectations, and then I also think we're going to see a lot of consolidation in these tools. There are some brilliant minds out there. There are a lot of companies that are really features for bigger businesses, and I think you're going to see a lot of consolidation in the legal space and the technology space, where these great features uh, are consolidated around different companies. I think you're already seeing some players emerge, uh, and I think that's what Stretto is trying to be. Is we are the experts in our domain, and we are finding, building, assembling, acquiring these tools, uh, and so that we can be an easier way for these attorneys to get their work done. Because no one's going to go and use 20 tools. That's not reality.
No.
So I think those are those are a lot of the things I see in the industry. But I do think it's there's going to be a better legal framework, and I think there'll be a consolidation of tools. And I think it's just the expectation 5 years from now is you have to use it professionally. You will have to use these tools.
Yep. Well, Robert, fascinating conversation. You're definitely doing yeoman's work for making this complex and tedious process a lot easier for all of us. So congratulations and thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's like I said, I geek out about this. It's what we all know. It's what we do, and so it's just it's an honor to get awards like this and to have someone acknowledge that we've added some value out there. We've added value to our space. It's very validating, and we appreciate it very much.